I am Zagade sir, and today we are going to deal with very interesting topic called modal auxiliary verbs. As we know that auxiliary verbs means what? Auxiliary verb means helping verbs. We called auxiliary verbs are helping verbs to help the main verb of a sentence. Okay, here the definition is given here. Modal auxiliary verbs means those verbs or auxiliary verbs are verbs to modify the mood of the verb, means it indicate or it modify the mood of the main verb of a sentence. For example, if I say he can paint a picture, he paints a picture, in this sentence we state or we speaking about the painting of that person. But if I say he can paint a picture, I use can in this sentence, and he can paint a picture means there is a ability, there is a person's ability to paint a picture, means there are modal auxiliary verbs can. Okay, I have written certain words here. For example, Sham plays tennis, Rahul completes his homework, she goes to church every day, RK acts in movies. Students, you will find that here are some main verbs here: plays, completes, goes and acts. Okay, these are the main verbs in this sentence, and this sentence rewrite as follows, but with the help of or there is a use of modal auxiliaries. For example, Sham is playing tennis. Okay, in this sentence you will find that is the helping verb in this sentence. Then Rahul must complete his homework. In this sentence, must is the auxiliary verb and complete is the main verb in this sentence. Then she should go to church every day. Okay, in this sentence, should is the helping verb or modal auxiliary, and go is the main verb in this sentence. Then RK can act in movies. Okay, in this sentence, can act, can is the modal auxiliary and act is the main verb in this sentence. Okay, students, there are two types of auxiliary verbs. You will find here types of modal auxiliary verbs, that is primary auxiliary and modal auxiliary verbs. Okay, or we can say modals only. Then let's see first primary auxiliary verb. In it, to be, that is am, is, are, was, were. These are the to be form of primary auxiliary verb. In this, those to be form are used in continuous tenses. For example, present continuous tense and past continuous tense. Then to have form of primary auxiliary verb, that is have, has, had. In this, these auxiliary verb or primary auxiliary verb, have, has, had. This primary auxiliary verb we use in present perfect tense and past perfect tense. Then to do form of primary auxiliary verb, that those are do, does, did. Okay, these are the do form of primary auxiliary verb: do, does, did. We use do, does, did in simple past tense as well as simple present tense in order to write negative sentences as well as interrogative sentences. Now, students, you think that what is the difference between primary auxiliary verb and modal auxiliary verb? There is a basic difference between primary auxiliary verb and modal auxiliary verb. We should know what is the difference, why they are classified into primary and modal auxiliary verb. Let's know. Okay, I have given one example here. Sachin is the hero of the match. Can you find the main verb in this sentence? Yes, is the main verb in this sentence. Means is the primary auxiliary verb though it is a primary auxiliary verb, it is sometimes is functions as the main verb in a sentence. Means primary auxiliary verb can stand alone in a sentence. They can change according to the subjects of a sentence. If I use here they, I use are. They are. If I use she, if I use I, it is we will write am. Means primary auxiliary verb can stand alone in a sentence. They can work as a main verb in a sentence. They also help the main verb of a sentence. For example, Sham is playing tennis. In this sentence you will find that is the helping verb and playing is the main verb in a sentence, and is this helping verb helps to the main verb of a sentence to create tenses in this. Students, you will find that model auxiliary, that is the main topic of today's lecture. That is, there are some model auxiliaries. Let's know first, or I will read for you. Can, could, will, would, shall, should, may, might, must, then ought to, used to, need and dare. These are the model auxiliary verb we have already studied in our 10th and 11th standards according to the use of model auxiliaries. If you see here, I can cook food. In this sentence, can, this model auxiliary expresses ability, that it is my ability to cook food. Now next sentence, that is I could cook food. If you see here in this sentence, could is the model auxiliary verb and could expresses my past ability. It was my past ability to cook food. Then next auxiliary verb, that is I may cook food. In this sentence, may is the auxiliary verb and it expresses less possibility. It is very less possibility that I may cook food. Then I might cook food. Might expresses, or might, this model auxiliary expresses remote possibility. It expresses, might expresses remote possibility. Then next model auxiliary, that is shall. Students, if you see, or if I use shall with I, if I use shall with I, it expresses, or shall expresses only my future action. Then I will cook food. In this sentence, will is the modal auxiliary verb, and if I use will with I or will expresses determination that I have decided, or it is my determination that I will cook food. Then next modal auxiliary, that is would. This modal auxiliary expresses past habitual action. This modal auxiliary expresses, or would expresses, past habitual action. In the past time I used to cook food, but now in present time I am not cooking food. Now I should cook food. In this sentence, should is the modal auxiliary verb and should expresses suggestion. I suggested myself that I should cook food. Then I must cook food. Must, as we know, we use must for compulsion. Here must expresses obligation. It is compulsory for me to cook food, because there is no one in my home and I must cook food. It is my obligation, or it is compulsory for me to cook food. Now if you see here this sentence, I ought to cook food, you will find that ought to is the modal auxiliary verb and it expresses moral obligation. Moral obligation means it is my moral duty to cook food. Now the next sentence is I need to cook food. Here in this sentence, need to expresses necessity. It is necessary for me to cook food. Now the next sentence, that is I dare to cook food. In this sentence you will find that dare to is used here, and it is a modal auxiliary verb. It expresses challenge. I took it as a challenge to cook food. Now the last example, that is I used to cook food. In this sentence, used to, this modal auxiliary expresses past habitual action. In the past time I used to cook food, but now in present time I am not cooking food. Now let us see various functions of modal auxiliary verb. In these sentences we use only one expressions or one example or one function of modal auxiliary. We will see what are the functions, what are the various functions, because if for example can have not only one example, one functions, it has several functions. Let us see those several functions. Already know what are the uses of modal auxiliaries in a sentence. Now each and every modal auxiliary have several or various functions. Let us see what are they. The first modal auxiliary, that is can. I can swim. Okay, if you find or if you see here in this sentence, I can swim. In this sentence, can expresses ability. It is my ability that I can swim. Now the same modal auxiliary if I use as can I borrow your car for a day. If I say can I borrow your car for a day, I say, or I am just requesting, or I am just trying to seek or trying to get permission to someone that can I borrow your car for a day. I am asking to someone, or I am asking for a permission. Now the next, that is could. As we know, could is the past form of can. Now could you help me to carry this box? Okay students, if you see, this is a question. Could you help me to carry this box? By this expression or by this question, I am expressing, or this could expresses very polite request. I am very politely requesting to someone that could you help me to carry this box? Now I could cook food. In this sentence, could expresses my past ability. Then we could go to SL World for a picnic. Okay, in this sentence, could expresses suggestion, that I suggesting that we could go to SL World for picnic. It is could expresses suggestion. Now the next is will. Will, as we know, we use in future tenses. I will not listen to what he says. No, will expresses determination, that I have already decided that I am not going to listen to what he says. Now I will go to market tomorrow. Okay, in this sentence, will expresses my determination, or it is my future action that tomorrow or in future I will go to market, or actually I have already decided that I go to market tomorrow. Now students, if you read the next, that is next auxiliary verb, that is would. I would go to gym every evening. Okay, in this sentence, would expresses my past habitual action. In past time, I would go to gym every evening. Then I used to go to gym every evening. Then the next sentence, that is would you lend me something? In this sentence, or it is a question, and in this, by this sentence or in this sentence, would expresses request or permission. Now the next modal auxiliary, that is shall. They shall be punished for their wrongdoings. In this sentence, shall, this auxiliary verb expresses threat. This auxiliary verb expresses threat. Now the next sentence, you shall not going gym every evening. Okay, in this sentence, shall expresses a kind of prohibition, or you are prohibited of going to gym every evening. Prohibition expresses by this modal auxiliary. Now, should, as we know, should is the past tense of shall. You should help the poor. Students, if you see in this sentence, should expresses moral obligation. It is our moral duty to help the poor people, to help the needy people. Now, the next sentence, that is, you should practice regularly. In this sentence, should expresses suggestions, that I suggesting someone that he should practice, he or she should practice regularly. Now, if you see the remaining modal auxiliary, that is must, this modal auxiliary, for example, we must respect all religions. In this sentence, must expresses obligation. Then we must reach the office, in time. In this sentence, must expresses a kind of compulsion. It is compulsory for us to reach the office in time. Then the next modal auxiliary, that is ought to. We ought to look after our old parents. Okay, here ought to, this modal auxiliary verb expresses moral obligation. Moral obligation means it is our moral duty that we should, or we ought to look after our old parents. Then they ought to win the match. Okay, students, if you see in this sentence, ought to is used here, and this expresses, ought to expresses probability, because that team is it is probable that that team will win the match, so they ought to win the match. It expresses, ought to expresses probability. Now, the next modal auxiliary, that is used to. As we know, used to, they used to play cricket every evening. In this sentence, used to expresses our past habitual action. In the past time, we used to play cricket every evening, but now we are not playing cricket. The next auxiliary verb, that is need to. Need he pay the right away? Question mark. It is a question, and in this sentence, need expresses a kind of necessity. Then the last modal auxiliary here, that is dare to. How dare you to touch my bag? Dare. This modal auxiliary expresses courage. Now, students, in this way we have learned that modal auxiliary verb and their various kind of functions. Thank you.